Okay. So the women's football in England had been banned by the FA on the 5th of December 1921. But despite all of these obstacles put in the way, the Kerr Ladies arranged a football tour across the Atlantic to give women's football, a well-needed boost in the homeland. And it's not changing. It's not changing slides now.
Not anymore?
No.
Hold on. If you go to the slides and click that cursor.
Sorry.
Let's have a look. Now have a go.
No.
Right.
But it worked so well before.
It did. It did. Right. What I'll do, just in case, sorry everybody about this, if you wouldn't mind exiting your screen.
Right. Stop share.
Stop share and then try again.
Okay. Share screen.
Take your time and hopefully.
Oh, there we go.
Is it working? Just change the slide.
I have done.
Brilliant. There we go.
Can you see that's Alfred Franklin, who was the manager of the team.
Yeah.
Can you see him? Yeah.
Carry on, Gail. It's all working. Go ahead.
Right. So yeah, Alfred Franklin was the manager of the team, and he was responsible for doing all the groundwork, getting it together. And they organised 24 fixtures prior to the departure, and all the girls were told that there were lots of women's teams waiting for them to play against, and they expected to be away for 3 months. The joint promoters of the tour were a David Brooks, who was living in Newcastle, and a Mr. A. Zelikman, who was part of the United States Football Association. And they were asking for $1,000 per match in appearance money. The English FA were opposed to the trip, but they did try to prevent the tour from going ahead. Nonetheless, the girls departed the UK on the 15th of September 1922. And here there are a couple of pictures, old newspaper pictures of them being pictured before the departure. And they sailed from Liverpool on the 15th of September 1922 aboard the SS Montclair. It was a rough crossing and most of the girls were seasick. And during the voyage, they saw what they described as beautiful icebergs. They reminded them of the Titanic disaster only 10 years earlier, but nothing could detract from the biggest adventure of their lives. And here's a couple of pictures of them on board the ship. They arrived in Quebec on the 22nd of September 1922, only to be told that the Dominion Football Association had refused permission for them to play in Canada. And during the tour, they would have to play against men's teams in the United States. There were no women's teams for them to play against after all. They were shocked and devastated to hear this news, and they'd no option but to agree. So they all decided just to regard the tour as an experiment. Here we can see them lining up in Pawtucket in Massachusetts, ready to take on the J&P Courts team. At this point, I'm going to just share with you a little bit about the girls and who they were. So I'll start from right to left. The first player there is Daisy Clayton, and she was a Liverpool girl and came over to Preston to play for the team. And while she was on this tour in America, she met a future husband and came back the following year and lived out the rest of her days. Next to Daisy is Carmen Pommier. She's a French lady. She first came to Preston in 1920 with the French team when they played at Deepdale in front of 25,000 spectators. And Carmen came to play for the team in 1921 and lived and worked in Preston, throughout her period that she was there. In fact, she had a long association with Preston. She came back every year, perhaps up until the Second World War. And with the team, the French team came over every year. There's so much to say about Carmen. I don't think there's enough time, but just very briefly, what an amazing lady she was. She was also a champion javelin thrower in France and won the World Games in Prague and London in the 1930s. And during the Second World War, France was invaded by Nazi Germany, and Carmen was eventually went to be part of the French resistance and risked her life on many occasions. She's had an incredible life. She came out actually and lived in America. In 1946, she came out to Rochester, New York, and worked at a company there. She was a formidable tennis player for the Rochester Tennis Club for many years. And then she went to to New York to work in the United Nations as a translator, and became an American citizen in 1954, but did return to live out the remainder of her days in her native France. So that's a brief description of Carmen. There's a full chapter of her in my book, and she has had a truly amazing life. Next to Carmen is Lily Parr. Lily Parr is probably one of the most famous Kerr Ladies players. She was the first player inducted into the National Football Museum Hall of Fame in England, noted for the power of her shot, and she's famous for once breaking a man's arm who challenged her that she'd never score a goal past him. So never one to shirk a challenge. Lily took a penalty against him, and as he put up his arm to try and save the shot, the power of his shot broke his arm. So, you know, it was the moral of the story was don't mess with Lily Parr. She was a great player. She played for the team from 1920 to 1951. During her career, scored 986 goals. And she was on the pitch. She was, you know, a giant, but off the pitch, she was very quiet. Great sense of humour, and she was just a great person to be around, from what everybody told me about her. Next to Lily is Jessie Walmsley. Now, Jessie was another World War heroine, but during the First World War, there was an explosion at a munitions factory in Lancaster where Jessie was working, and she was part of the rescue operation, leading people to safety and risking her own life, and she was commended for bravery for her actions during that time. She was a great player, midfield player for the Kerr Ladies, and she's one of the best of her era. She's one of my favourites, is Jessie. She was a lovely lady. Next to Jessie, we've got Florrie Redford. That's Florrie there. If you can see the cursor. Florrie was a fantastic football player. She could kick with either foot, centre forward for the team, great goal scorer. During the US tour, she was leading goal scorer, averaging 2 goals a match. And during 1921, Florrie actually scored 170 goals throughout the year, and just showing what a great player she was. You couldn't afford to have Florrie Redford on your team today. She was just incredible. Next to Florrie Redford, we've got Lily Lee. Lily was a Preston girl, and she went to France with the team, played lots of games with them. She played in the first match against the French team at Deepdale and had to be carried off, was injured. And in fact, she did get injured when they played the Hispano team on this tour. She was knocked out, but she recovered, and she did all right for the rest of the tour. Next to Lily is Alice Kell. Alice was the first ever captain of the team, and she was a wonderful role model and leader. She was a fantastic all-round football player. She played in defence but could play anywhere. She was a right back. But during the to illustrate just how good she was, at the Goodison match in 1920, when 53,000 went to watch them, Alice was playing obviously at right back, and she got a little bit of a niggly knock in the first half, and Mr. Franklin moved her up to centre forward in the second half, and she scored a hat-trick, and they won 4-0. So that gives an illustration of Alice's versatility. She was, as I say, a great role model for the team, and she was just a great player. Next to Alice is Jenny Harris. Jenny was another fantastic player, natural ability with the ball, could dribble from one end of the pitch to the other. And her combination with Florrie Redford up front, as Florrie and Jenny, they were the great goal scorers. They were the telepathic between them. They were known as the Dick Kerr's box of tricks. They really were fantastic players. Next to Jenny is Alice Woods. Alice was responsible for bringing Lily Parr and Daisy Clayton to the team. There's Lily there and Daisy at the end. Alice was a sprinter originally, and she was quite famous during her sprinting years. And in 1918, she took part in the first race for amateur athletics for women in Blackpool, and she won the race. So she was a great player. And actually, to illustrate the power of Lily Parr's shot as well, one time Alice got in the way of Lily Parr when she took a shot, and the ball hit her in the stomach and burst her appendix. So that's another reason never to get in the way of one of Lily's shots. But yeah, she was a great player. But Molly Walker, who stood next to her, she could run faster than Alice, and she was known as Lightning by the team. That was a nickname. And she was a really fast runner, and she was the first player actually to be transferred from another team to the Dick Kerr Ladies. She used to play for Lancaster originally, but later on in later life, when she was married and had two sons, when she used to take them to the school sports day and join in with whatever the races were, they had to stop her entering them because she would win them all the time, and it didn't give anyone else a chance. So yeah, Molly was a really fast runner and a great player for the team. And last but not least in this image, we've got Florrie Haslam. Florrie came to play from Bolton, and she scored many important goals for the team. She was with them for a few years, and she was another great player. So that just gives you a little bit of insight into who the ladies were who came to play for the Dick Kerr Ladies and came out to America to play in your wonderful country. And this is the team that they played that day, J&P Courts. They actually managed a 4-4 draw, and the J&P Courts team had won the championship of the Professional American Soccer League the same year. And the newspapers reported that the Dick Kerr Ladies showed remarkable spirit in the games, even though they were pitted against some of the strongest men's clubs in the country. And here are a couple of pieces of information about the teams that they played against. James Gallagher, who was outside right for the Courts team, later played for the US in the World Cup of 1930. Pete Renzulli is a member of the National Hall of Fame. He said, "Here is something. I played against them in 1922 in goal for the Patterson team, and we were the national champions, and we had a hell of a job beating them 6-3. So that gives some idea of the respect that these guys had playing against a women's team on this tour. Another picture I'd like to show you. I'm sorry it's out of focus. It wasn't me that took it though, but I just want to illustrate the pitches that they were playing on, really. You can see the spectators are just around the outside of the pitch. I don't know where they were playing them, but the lady on the left there, that's Annie Crozier, who was the physio and trainer for the team. She'd run on if they needed the magic bucket and sponge if ever anybody got interested. Anybody got injured. So she was a great lady, was Annie. She really was. But apart from playing football, they did manage to get some free time, a bit of time to themselves, do a bit of sightseeing. Here they are enjoying the nice day. I'll just briefly tell you who they are. From left to right this time, it's Lily Parr, Annie Crozier, Alice Kell, Carmen Pommier, Florrie Redford, and Jessie Walmsley. And sat at the front, that's Jenny Harris, Alice Mills and Jenny Harris. So those were the lassies that were having a wander around. It's also documented that when playing the game in Washington, that President Harding kicked off the match and he autographed a football, which they brought home and are showing in this picture here. This is from 1937 when they were taking part in a victory dinner, but they still had the ball there that was signed by President Harding. I don't know where it is now. I'd love to know whatever loft or cellar it might be hiding in, but they'd kept the ball all those years. So it was very interesting. I hope for you to know that President of the United States kicked off for the Dick Kerr Ladies. And the last match of the tour that they played while they were out there was played in Philadelphia. And before the game, 4 members of the team, Florrie Haslam, Jenny Harris, Molly Walker, Lily Parr, they ran a relay race with the American Women's Olympic team. The Preston girls led all the way and were first past the winning post. And as you would imagine, they were absolutely delighted with the victory. And here they are, pictured after the historic race. So I'd like to show you a list of fixtures and results that they played during the tour. They played 9 games. They won 2, drew 3, and lost 4. And that's different from lots of the stats that were out there. I spent lockdown going through everything, and I discovered that the Baltimore game, I had two sources of in reference for that, and they both said it was a 4-3 victory. But when I had was able to use the internet like lots of other people, the result for the game was actually a 4-3 defeat. So we had to change it to make it right, because it's important to get everything right for future generations for this team. So yeah, they played 9, won 2, drew 3, and lost 4. So those are the fixtures and all the results. So they played at some top places. I hope you're quite impressed with where they played. So they set sail for home in November aboard the SS Adriatic, and Alice Mills is the player with the Stars and Stripes flag here in this picture, and nobody could find her on board the ship. She didn't want to go back to Preston. They had to send Traveller's Aid to go and bring her back. America had made a lasting impression on her, and she vowed that one day she would return to make a new life for herself. So not long after the Dick Kerr ladies had returned back to the UK, a book was published in New York by Helen Frost and Hazel J. Cubberley called Field Hockey and Soccer for Women. And there's lots of fantastic photographs in there of them teaching women to try to play football and all the things that they could do. And it really is an incredible thing. And I always wonder, could the Dick Kerr ladies have been the inspiration for American women to start to play soccer? I'd like to think so. It's quite a lovely thought to have. And just a few months after this, in 1923, 19-year-old Alice Mills got her wish, took the very brave step of leaving Preston forever. The lone traveller migrated to the United States as she hoped she would, and she met her future husband, J.M. Lambert, and here they are on their wedding day. And despite the myth of football harming a woman's fertility, Alice gave birth to 6 healthy girls, and she lived a long and prosperous life. And here are Alice and Em with the 6 girls. I had become friends with the family, and I was organising a celebration dinner for the Dick Kerr ladies at the National Football Museum on International Women's Day in 2003. It was a wonderful evening, but it was made all the more special with the arrival of all 6 of the daughters of Alice, who made their own pilgrimage across the Atlantic to visit Preston for the very first time to honour the memory of their mum. It was Winnie, the lady in the pink jacket at the back of the line, who first contacted me, and we've all become friends over the years. She invited me out to her home on several occasions, and the whole family have been absolutely wonderful, giving me a fantastic time and telling me all about their wonderful mum, Alice Mills. Alice was born in the same area where I grew up, and as a child going to school, I would pass by the house where she was born every day, little realising the significance of who was born there. And I was actually christened at the same church as Alice Mills, and that's my claim to fame. I asked Winnie if she would take me to the cemetery so that I could pay my own respects, take some tribute to Alice, and I wanted to touch base with this young lass who grew up just down the road from me. And there's Alice's resting place on the other side of the world. I'm still in touch with Winnie, who's now, she's 91 years old next month, and she's as bright as a button, and we talk on the phone often. I'm sad to say that she lost 2 of her sisters this year within a matter of weeks, but Winnie's doing good, and it really is a joy for me to have her in my life. So despite the FA ban and against all the odds, the Dick Kerr ladies continued playing football until 1965, and it's estimated that their playing record is they played 755, won 682, drew 39, and lost only 34 games. And they raised over £180,000 for charity. But in today's terms, that figure would be worth in excess of £10 million. They must surely be the most successful amateur football team in the history of the game. So if you want to know more about the Dick Kerr ladies, the tour of America, and indeed anything about them, you can find it all in my book, In a League of Their Own. It's 453 pages. There's everything in there. It's like War and Peace, really. I'm very proud of it, and I hope if anybody wants to buy it, that they'd be very, get a lot of pleasure out of it and enjoy learning more about all these incredible women who played from 1917 right through to 1965. So that's all from me and my wittering at the moment. So I'm more than happy to sit here all night chatting to you and answering questions. So without further ado, we'll go back to David.
These are two books by Gail, right? In a League of Their Own, which again is out in an expanded, revised edition, and official Dick Kerr Ladies Football's Forgotten Legends. So again, perhaps Gail can talk about those a little bit in detail. Some of you on the call here may have contributed to this book that came out last year, Soccer Frontiers: The Global Game in the United States, 1863 to 1913. Right, 1913, of course, is when the United States Soccer Federation was launched, and I know in my chapter, I went up to the formation of the United States Football Association. The editors, Chris Bolzman and George Kiosis, kept bugging me. Can you please give us some information on? Can you find anything about women's football? And I searched and searched and searched to no avail. With the formation of the USFA being the cutoff, Christmas Day, right, a few weeks after the formation of the United States Football Association, the St. George's Field Club did play on Christmas Day, a match that got a lot of publicity, a lot of press, but it ended up being an abbreviated match on a shortened pitch that was 8v8. But that was, that was 9 years before the visit of this fabled club, this visit from England, and for them to arrive over here and not have any women's competition, and for them to be shocked by this, right? To not be playing women, to have to play men's sides, but not just men's sides. These were the elite men's sides of the American Soccer League. So the aforementioned Patterson Football Club, this is the club that won the Dewar's Cup, that played the women from Preston at Olympic Park in Clifton, New Jersey. And again, just so everybody gets an idea, right? They drew a crowd of 5,000. It was the week before the regular season was about to start, right? So they played Centro Hispano that day, but they drew a crowd of 5,000. Really good numbers by any standard in that year. And they played at New York Oval on 150th Street and River Avenue. They drew 7,000. And then they played New York Field Club at Lenox Oval in Harlem. And that's an image of the field where they would have played in Harlem. And this gives you a reasonable idea of how many people would turn out for a game. So if you get a few thousand people coming out, it again speaks to the celebrity status that these players enjoyed. One little bit of a tip for those of you who are looking to do research into this tour of Dick Kerr Ladies: you may be surprised to find information on Newcastle United Women's Football Club, right? As Gail's images showed, they're wearing those beautiful black and white vertical striped shirts that do resemble Newcastle. And the New York Times, for the first couple of matches that they reported, they're actually reporting Newcastle United Women's Football Club, which is very interesting given the Football Association's ban, right? They, of course, would not have been allowed to be Newcastle United's Women's Football Club. So that's a very interesting detail. But for those of you who are doing more regional histories or are focusing in on some of the clubs that ended up playing Dick Kerr Ladies, I know Derek Gonzalez is our resident expert on all things Fall River. He could speak to some of those sides. But if you're doing research on this, you may be trying to look up Dick Kerr Ladies, but you may actually have a little bit more luck looking up Newcastle United. And again, the reasons for that are a little bit hazy, I suppose. And Gail, if you don't mind, that would be my first question. If you could talk a little bit about the promotion of the tour and how there could have been any confusion or association with Newcastle United other than their jersey itself.
Yeah. David Brooks, who was one of the promoters of the team, he was involved with Newcastle and women's football up in the northeast of England. And Newcastle did in fact play against the Dick Kerr Ladies in 1918. So that might be how he got introduced to Alfred Franklin, the manager. And he was a bit of a wide boy, shall we say, a bit of a chancer. And he might have just called them Newcastle United Ladies for his own glorification, really. I might be doing him an injustice, but I'm not sure that I am. It might be a misinterpretation on the press, or a deliberate thing by David Brooks, who was, co-promoter of the tour. But they definitely weren't the Newcastle United Ladies. They were the Dick Kerr Ladies.
Just a curious little tidbit about that, right? In terms of anybody trying to do that research, that you will find a little bit more if you throw in Newcastle United Women's into your search engine as you dig out. And again, Gail's been at this since putting together that reunion in 1992, right? That's the year, right?
Yeah.
But as a young girl, you would have heard about Dick Kerr Ladies as sort of, the old timers would see you getting stuck in and say, oh, she should turn out for the Dick Kerr ladies side, right?
Yeah. When I was playing on the park with the lads, I remember somebody going by and saying that, would say, oh, she's good, she should be playing for Dick Kerr Ladies. And I thought, how strange it was that there was a ladies football team in Preston, my hometown, when we weren't allowed to play football. When I went to school, football was still, there was still a ban. I didn't know that there was a ban. You just accept life as it is. It was just how it was. But yeah, that's what was said. So I grew up near the factory as well. So it's all very close by. I feel like, I'm walking in their footsteps whenever I'm, around where I grew up. And, most of the places in town, when I'm driving around, I just think, oh, can't even walk down here, or, just things like that. It's wonderful to be so close to them, really.
Those of us involved in American soccer history are well aware of the amnesia we suffer from, as we're constantly being told it's new here. Tom McCabe, who's the president of the Society for American Soccer History, is always imploring us to complicate the narrative. And again, what I love so much about this story, this centenary celebration, is the degree to which it completely complicates the narrative, right? Where we do get a little bit conceited as American soccer fans is over the success of our women's team. But of course, so much of that is a consequence of Title IX. And really the emergence of the sport here in the early 1970s, right? The real explosion of interest. I see Dave DeRico, a legend from that era, has joined us here. His fellow New York Arrows star Steve Zungel just got in the Hall of Fame. Maybe he should be someday as well. So again, that growth, that interest in the game from then. So a lot of Americans are surprised to find out that there was professional football being played here in the 1920s. But the fact that there was a women's team that came over and played these great men's team really, really complicates that narrative all the more. One thing I thought was kind of timely in terms of some of what was going on in terms of that football ban was, yes, there was a sporting misogyny involved in the idea of, well, it's one thing for women to compete at the 80 meters or something that's not so much involved in contact. Yeah, there was that misogyny associated to complications in childbirth, which of course was proven absolutely absurd. But one of the kind of hidden things about that too was that some of the charity work that Dick Kerr Ladies Women's Football Club were involved with was, yes, for hospitals, orphanage, veterans causes, of course, having started in the munitions factory in 1917. Right when the workers started, the women are in the factory, gathering there in the factory, the kind of free time that they had. But one of the things that offended the powers that be, of course, were their choice of some charities and the miners' strike at that time, and their association with labor movements. It seems to me that the women in this football club were very, very progressive socially. And I wondered, it seems to me they were victims of their success, that being the most popular football club in the United Kingdom was a threat to the men of course, coming back and trying to reclaim not just their jobs in the factories, but their jobs playing football, which of course wasn't a full-time professional gig. They weren't living high on the hog, right? Anybody playing professional football at any time would have had to have at least a side hustle of some kind, right? So these women recruited from all around the country, right? Again, when the English women's FA started, they put in a rule that said that nobody could play beyond 15 miles from the home side, which excluded Dick Kerr's women.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about maybe the environment around the miners' strike. And again, that great center forward was herself a registered nurse. My mother is a registered nurse. And I get thinking about those different charities and the progressive movements and the miners' strike, and obviously talk of strikes this week in the UK. I wondered if you could elaborate on that a little bit in terms of the threat they pose to hegemony.
I can't elaborate in as much as the Dick Kerr ladies. I have no evidence for them doing anything for the miners' strike. They only ever raised money during that period for the wounded soldiers, after the war, because most of the girls had lost family members during the war, so they knew exactly what they were doing, what they were playing for. And it's all documented in my book that they in 1920, when the French team came over, they pledged just to for all of their matches to be for the wounded soldiers and the association of those. And they raised lots and lots of money for them. So I don't know anything at all about the miners' strike. Can't elaborate on that at all. But what I do know, I think when the ban came along, when they stopped them playing, I think there were political reasons for it, as well as the FA being afraid of the competition, because in 1920 the Football League had been practically doubled in size. There was a new Division 3 North and South. So the Dick Kerr ladies, from their point of view, were attracting too many spectators. So it had to be stopped. And I think the Goodison match at the end of 1920 was perhaps the wake-up call. That was the death knell, really, being victims of their own success, because throughout 1921, after that, they made it increasingly more difficult for them to play, whereby the clubs had to get permission from the FA to stage a women's game, and they had to send receipts in afterwards for whatever the money, however much money was raised and how it was appropriated afterwards. So by the end of the year, that's when they dealt the fatal blow. So they were leading up to it, as I said. But I think the Goodison match was the big factor with 53,000, because that day as well, the day before, Everton had played at home against either Arsenal or Chelsea. I can't remember which one it was. And then in the afternoon of the Goodison match, Liverpool were playing at home against Arsenal or Chelsea. I can't remember which way it was. So you are on Merseyside with the two biggest men's teams, probably in the country as well at the time, playing at home, and yet 53,000 still come to watch a women's football match. So they would have been, oh, goodness me, what's all this about then? We can't have that, can we? So there would have been that kind of thing. And I think after the war as well, the political side of things, politicians, whoever, would have wanted things to get back to normal. And it wasn't normal for women to play football. It was a wartime phenomenon, really. And they didn't really want it carrying on after that. Women were expected to get back into the kitchen and run the home and all that. And you couldn't have women running around a football field. And so they did it like they do with everything these days. They plan things for a long time and it creeps in slowly. And that's what happened with the Dick Kerr ladies' demise, the women's football demise. But there was, after that, there was only the Dick Kerr ladies that continued to play throughout the ban, from 1921 to 1965. So that, nobody else did that, only them. And that's, for me, what makes them special. And the great record that they had, and the quality of players that they produced, not just, your Lily Parrs, your Flo Redfords at the beginning, But after the war, or just before the Second World War, we have Joan Worley, who grew up playing football with Sir Tom Finney, one of the greats of English football, and Preston North End. And you know, there were lots of great players after that who you know, they created wonderful records in their own right. So they did continue to produce great footballers. And when I interviewed men who had actually seen women play in the 1920s, they said to me, I said, why did you go to watch a women's football match? And they said, well, we wanted to see a good game of football. There was no gender specific reason for their, you know, it was just, we wanted to see a good game of football. And that speaks volumes.
Well, and again, you know, understanding that these weren't just local 11s here in the United States that they were playing, right? These were the elite teams. Where when the American Soccer League was starting to attract the top talent from all around the world. There was, you know, it wasn't a fluke that we finished third